Part 1, we talked about how matchmaking works. It's an incredibly complex system that needs to consider many different inputs to make every single game as fair as possible. For Part 2, we're going to address some community concerns regarding the matchmaker from the perspective of the competitive game mode. Let's get into it. TL, Doctor, your ranked games are formed based on your internal matchmaking rating, MMR, regardless of your displayed skill tier. MMR changes based on the result of each match, with the amount of MMR you gain or lose depending on several factors like how highly rated your opponents were or how recently you last played. Our team is aware of some community pain points with competitive and matchmaking. We have a set of improvements coming to matchmaking, and we'll also...
Mainly it's the fact that they have two different ranked systems in the game right now. One is your actual ranked emblems /SR, which for some reason is not attached to your internal MMR, which is the new system they transitioned to in Overwatch 2. But for some reason they kept the old system hooked up, but it didn't properly reflect the new system for whatever reason, and it didn't really make a whole lot of sense. And they never explained why that was the case. And actually, as I've described or actually talked about in my last video, in my last when we covered the MMR system part 1, is that it seems like they transitioned to a new system and then just never got rid of the old. It's antiquated and is a system that they never completely removed or fixed or flushed out. Like if you were going to replace a new system, an old system with a new system, why would you keep the old system around? Like, it didn't make sense, and they never explained their logic behind keeping it.
So working on updates to the competitive system. For competitive play in Season 3, we'll reduce the number of wins between competitive updates from 7 to 5 wins or 20 to 15 losses.
Matter.
For our matchmaker, we're implementing role delta changes that will match similarly ranked players with...
So, in the case of the 5 and 20 or the 7 and... or the 5 and 15 and 7 and 20... people got pissed off because they had to wait so long to see their rank change and it turned into an anxiety thing, which it wasn't. It actually should reduce anxiety. But some people get so, stuck in the motion where they have to see a rank change that they then feel as though they're entitled to see it no matter what. It was really weird. It actually, it reduces the whole thing is it reduces it and it hides the weighted system in the background because it's not just based on your wins and losses anymore.
Within each role. Season 4 will include additional information about your current wins and losses on the competitive update screens. Our team has begun work on longer-term features and updates for both the matchmaker and competitive game mode, and we look forward to sharing more on those plans in the future. Here's what we're currently seeing in Ranked. We've seen your feedback on matches with wide skill variation, and we want to talk about a few reasons that could be happening as well as our plans to address your concerns. We allow players to group together even when there's a difference in the MMR between party members, and this is a major source of wide skill disparities in
You don't fucking say. There's a reason they didn't allow it in Overwatch 1. We are respinning the wheel at this point, guys, so whoever came in to either replace the old developers or thought they're smarter than the old MMR system now has to take on the weight of that old system. The teething issues they had, the problems they went through in the old system, they're now going through in Overwatch 2 because they decided that they're going to make a better system, and then they didn't. And now they're going to have to redo everything they did in Overwatch 1. Really, really fucking weird. Like in Overwatch 1, for instance, you couldn't group. Groups could only play against other groups, right? Yeah, in Overwatch 2, except for 2 stacks in ranked. And in Overwatch 2, until you reach GM, you can play in 5 stacks. Why? I don't know. My guess is they want to encourage people to play in groups so that they can fuck over people. And basically, that's what happens generally is in pub stomp groups, is you fuck over the solos because they're solo players. And there's a lot, as I said, there are a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of differences between pubs, a bunch of solo players, and a group of friends, because these guys actually care about each other. They're willing to work together, or they actually just know everyone and they know what they're capable of, supporting each other. It's an entirely different system, which is why they decided to keep them separate in Overwatch 1. In Overwatch 2, they're like, how could this hurt? Let's put them together. And in doing so, you literally get stomped on pretty routinely in pubs, but they don't tell you, in quick play that is, pubs and quick play, they don't tell you because they don't show you who's in groups, because then you would know you're getting pub stomped. So they keep you in the dark so you don't know you're getting pub stomped. While you're getting pub stomped,
Probably to encourage people that are in groups because they're having fun to spend more money. That's the dark underbelly, is when people are in groups jacking off with each other, they're willing to spend more money on a game because they're having fun, right? They're having fun at the expense of other people's fun because they're in an unbalanced scenario. The whole reason you have SBMM is to prevent shit like that, right? You could just remove SBMM if you want a system like that, and it'd basically be the same thing. And by the way, I don't think they should remove skill-based matchmaking. I think that's very important for everyone to actually have fun. And while it gets sweatier at higher MMR, you should just be accustomed to the fact that you aren't always going to win. It's just the way it's going to work. I don't win all the time, for sure. And it's just the way that things work. Yeah, because there's just people, and even then, sometimes you can prevent the loss, and sometimes you can't prevent the loss, and there's all different sorts of things that happen. But like the whole let's remove SPMM stems from usually streamers that want to show off how skilled they are by dicking on people of lower skill. That's the way it works. When you're playing COD or when you're playing PUBG, I don't even know if PUBG has skill-based matchmaking in it. You play a game and you want to show off how skilled you are basically by fucking over people that are lower skilled. You don't want to play against people of your skill because then it doesn't show you how skilled you are, right? Yeah, because there's other people that are around your skill level, even if there's far less of them. The thing is that people can't really show it off if there's far less of them because there's no real visual representation, and games don't always do a very good job of showing you how far of the sliver of the pie you're part of, right? When you look at a distribution of players, how far down this tail end into the skill level you are. I think in Overwatch 1, there used to be a post on it. In Overwatch 1, when you were in GM, it's like the top 2% of the player base or something. So you're top 1%, you're in a very select group of individuals, but that isn't displayed to, no, you have to dig for it. It's not told to everyone. Everyone thinks it's a linear distribution, notches in a post between people at different skill levels, and it's not. It's not the way weighted distributions work. It's not the way a ranked system works. Depending on which game you're talking about. It's not the way a ranked system works. Because it's not just, you play enough and you get to the top MMR and that's it.
Matches. We're working on some changes that will match parties with similar MMR disparities together more frequently, which we...
Yeah, and as I was talking about before, in Overwatch 1, just getting back on topic here, in Overwatch 1, they didn't have this because they knew this was not just a can of worms, but it was also something that's very, very difficult to balance. And they just made it so that groups play against groups, and they generally didn't because it was a huge deal. It was a pain in the ass because they're ultra fucking sweaty. That's who you're playing against. In Overwatch 1, groups didn't want to play against groups because they knew the other group was going to be super fucking sweaty, so it became unfun. But in Overwatch 2, they're still sweating, only you're playing against puggers, you're playing against pub stomping them, so then these guys just get dicked on over and over and over again, and these guys go, oh, this is so much fun, oh, did you see how horrible they were playing together, oh my god, these, like, literally zero voice comms in any way, shape, or form on pubs, yeah, these guys are so fucking bad, and yeah, they're having a gay old time at the expense of basically normal players.
We expect to noticeably reduce how often we make wide matches. This will make it much less likely for a solo player or a party with a narrow skill disparity to end up in a match with a wide skill disparity. Often matches with a wide displayed skill tier difference still look very close when looking at the difference in MMR between the two teams. The partial rank reset at the beginning of the season may be exaggerating this by making it look like someone is lower than their actual rank.
Yeah.
However,
because they have different
regardless
ranks.
of the seasonal reset, both skill tier and MMR can decay over time for players who are inactive for a considerable amount of time. Players who return may see dramatic shifts to their skill tiers as they resume playing regularly, and the game becomes more certain of that player's current skill. We've also seen the community talk about inconsistent games or how some games feel incredibly one-sided, and that feedback has been helpful. Understanding what causes one-sided
unrelated to the rank system, there is a shitload of cheating in Overwatch 2, and that can 100%, you have a guy that pushes a button, the matchmaker cannot fucking factor in this guy pushing a button over and over and over again, because it doesn't know when he's going to push the button or what's going to trigger him unless he's doing every match. What triggers him into pushing that button that increases his skill level dramatically, right? Yeah. So maybe over time, it could put him in the right position where he's going to be in games, but there's still going to be this wide disparity if he toggles in one game and then doesn't toggle in the next game between where he's actually at and where his cheat rank essentially is. Yeah, which is unrelated to the rank system being broken.
Matches and how to reduce their frequency has become
There's a lot of cheating in Overwatch 2 compared to Overwatch 1.
This is a tricky problem because one-sided matches can happen in Overwatch, even between balanced teams. So, our first step has been to study the problem and understand the various factors that can
Observably
cause one-sided
balanced
matches, and
problems.
we're
Where
planning to share what
objectively
we learn
balanced
with you in a
matches where you
developer
think
blog
they're
down the
balanced, but
road.
they aren't.
Competitive updates are another topic we've been exploring. We want you to feel a sense of progression without needing to focus on a super granular number like a skill rating, but we
Yep.
feel, and agree with the community, that competitive updates are a bit too infrequent currently.
I think the 7 and 20 was perfect, and I think they just need to have it mirror the actual skill of the player, not this stupid fucking whatever rank on the outside. I don't even know what it is, just a gold star rank? What does it even mean? I don't think they even know. I don't even know how they factor it in. I don't know what your outward facing rank even means because it's not reflective of the MMR system. So what is the outwardly viewable rank? What does it even mean? They've never actually explained it.
Here's the direction we're taking moving forward. What we're doing in Season 3 based on community feedback. We're implementing some updates to the matchmaker that try to place pairs of players with similar MMR on each role on either team. This means that opposing tanks should be more similarly matched than before, and likewise for the other respective roles.
Tanks matter a lot.
The goal with this change is to make the average MMR between each role more evenly matched to each other instead of looking more broadly across the entire team to balance things out. This is a major change.
Yeah, and it matters a lot because if your MMR is different inside of your roles, especially in a role that has much more meaning than other roles, I'd say DPS is at the bottom of the barrel now, unless they're like aimbot level. Inside the roles, if you have a tank that doesn't reach like the skill floor of playing a tank where they have a general idea of going to when they should go to objectives, when they should contest, when they should apply pressure, putting aside, like the meta or the macro strategy aspect, which is really big for tanks. If they don't understand that, it really doesn't matter what this extra skill bit is attached of how many fire strikes they're hitting or when they get a pin or get a pick or something, because what really matters, if they don't have this baseline skill set down, you are at a huge disadvantage. Because then they don't know when to apply pressure, and they're essentially worthless as a tank. Supports being able to heal properly also matters a shitload. And DPS are kind of at the bottom of the barrel because, as it turns out, supports can actually put out a significant amount of damage. Yeah, especially if they're cheating, like the Baptiste we had the other night that had 15,000 damage at the end of the match, 15,000 damage and more limbs than anyone on his team. Yeah, like 25 limbs or something like that because he was cheating. Yeah, putting that aside. Yeah, they have to balance inside of the class roles, which makes a lot of sense because this game is no longer you can pick whatever role you want, right? You have to stick to your roles, and if you have one, they could actually have different skills. Let's say the average skill between roles, like you have two roles that are of the same average skill, they could have a skill discrepancy between the tank, the DPS, and the support, and they could potentially just average these two out, but the players inside these brackets between the roles themselves on both sides need to be the same. And it's kind of surprising, once again, that they haven't taken that account, because I'm pretty sure it did in Overwatch 1. And here we are, respinning the wheel again. We're remaking the old system.
Change to the matchmaker, so we'll be actively monitoring for any unintended side effects. We've seen feedback that having to play as many as 26 matches to get an update has been discouraging for players. Starting with Season 3, you'll now get a competitive update with every 5 wins and 15 losses. In the mid-season patch for Season 3...
They could probably even change this. Why does it have to be 5 and 15? They could just make it every 15 games or every 10 games, regardless of wins or losses. The offset of 7 and 20 and 5 and 15 seems as though that offset is there because losses have more of an impact. They want you to see less how much of an impact losses have on your game than wins. In terms of you viewing it as an outside source, it shouldn't matter. It should just be all the same. So 15 games, 10 games. After you see 10 games, then it should give you an update, right? Why there's a difference between wins and losses, I'm still not completely sure of. That has to be something with losses having more weight on your MMR in an unforeseeable way that they don't want you to see than wins do. Because there's a difference here, and the more obfuscated number is the larger one, right? Because after 5 wins, you can see it, right? And after 15 wins, you can see it. So there must be stuff that happens in losses that you can easily suss out more so than in win games, which is weird. They could just change the number to like 10 or 15 games, whatever they want it to be. So you aren't stuck in like limbo of more games on each side of the spectrum.
UI. so information about your progress toward a competitive update will always be viewable.
Very weird.
Also, beginning with our mid-season patch, top 500 players will see their top 500 leaderboard rank updated after every match rather than in competitive updates.
That's interesting. So that just completely changes. So once again, if they're this completely throws out the 5 and 15 system. If you can see your update after each match, you can get a generally granular idea of what you're doing in each match and how much it's changing things. Unless the outwardly facing rank is still not linked to your internal MMR, at which point your top 500 rank being changed. I don't even know how do they gauge it if it's not influenced based on your internal like skill rating. What the fuck?
What we're doing in the near future, we've heard your feedback and confusion around seasonal rank decay and rank resets. Starting with Season 4, we're planning to remove seasonal competitive rank resets and all current and past seasonal rank decay.
What?
We'll continue to build out competitive updates in Season 4 when we add information about your current wins and losses to the competitive update screens. We're hoping this additional context will help you better interpret changes to your skill tier and division in the update. We're also looking into possible ways to provide you with more information about the matchmaking quality of your game.
What? Starting with Season 4, we're planning to remove seasonal competitive rank resets and all current and past seasonal rank decay. The whole reason you have decay is because you aren't as skilled as you were when you were playing the game actively, so you need a reintroductory period. What are they doing? Why would you do this? What? We'll continue to build competitive updates in Season 4 when we add information about your current wins and losses to the competitive update screen. Hoping additional context will help you better interpret changes to your skill tier and division in the update. Am I just not understanding something here? What? These blog posts, guys, about the matchmaker are some of the most convoluted shit I've seen. Then again, with the last patch, they nerfed Sojourn by not nerfing her railgun, which is what people have problems with, but instead nerfing her mouse 1. Yeah, that's not what was unbalanced about her. And with Kiriko, they nerfed her overall healing instead of her Senju bean, her Sensu bean. Her fucking invulnerability, which really fucking matters because it literally destroys entire parts of the game. And its invulnerability that isn't even an ultimate is horrible. It's horribly broken. I don't think they know what the fuck they're doing. And this is weird because in Overwatch 1, you generally could figure out what they're doing. These guys have no idea what they're doing. What the fuck is this shit? So, starting with Season 4, we're planning to remove seasonal competitive rank resets and all current, past, and seasonal rank decay. So DK, putting aside the rank resets, DK is there because when you leave the game and you come back, you are not going to be in the same position from a competitive standpoint as prior. The DK is there not to make you feel bad as a player, it is there to help you get back into things. And then obviously you can level up a lot faster once you get back into things. Rank resets aren't entirely necessary, depending on how much data they have on you. So the rank resets part itself, just completely separating the decay, separating the decay from the rank resets. Rank resets aren't really necessary unless their MMR system completely changes. So they need to reevaluate basically players from the ground up, or they don't have enough data on you because in Season 1, the last season was generally incomplete, and they could still do this behind the scenes, right? They could still reset your data if you've been gone for a really long time or something. This is really fucking weird. This is really weird. Decay has generally been understood in most games. Even Dead by Daylight has finally added decay to their game as far as you leaving and coming back. Decay is important because you are not the same person you were when you last played competitive for 2 years and you came back like 6 months later or something. Decay is important. It's not there to make you feel bad. And then they explain why they removed it. What are they even doing? Like, this is something that they easily figured out. And yeah, so Unhuman, my guess is, as I mentioned earlier and in my past videos, is I think there's a new development team there with new blood, and they think they know better than what was already there. And they're basically trying to redo everything, basically trying to make a better system. But in doing so, they encountered a lot of the problems that the first team encountered before they were there. And it's not just Kaplan. Obviously, a development team is made up of multiple individuals. But it's really fucking weird that what we are seeing through reading the MMR patch notes is it seems like they have a new system. Their new system does not work as good as the old system, hence why there's so many people that are angry about it. Their new system does not work as well as the old system, and they're trying to fix problems that the old system already solved within their new system by redoing the wheel. Like, decay is not something that's not understood. Like, most people, you guys understand this, right? If you leave a game for like 6 months or a year, you're not going to be the same person when you come back. And it is there to edge you in. So the games that you play after, well, you're in, let's say, decay mode, while you're in decay mode, when you come back, will have more meaning once you get into things, and it'll plateau, right? Because when you're being introduced, your MMR, your changes, you might be a lot better when you come back too. Who knows? When you come back, are going to have a lot more influence on your MMR, and then it's just going to level off again, right? So it'll get you more aligned back into the position you're in, like your placement games, let's say at the beginning of the season, get you more back into the MMR you should actually be in, and then also help you ease into things too. Like, let's say if you got rusty, which most people do, you got rusty, or if you download a cheat, maybe it'll put you back into the tier you should be in. Maybe it'll put you back into the tier that you should be in. But yeah, it definitely seems like their development team is different than what it was in Overwatch 1. And whoever's in charge of this shit are very inexperienced, and they think they can make a better system, and they don't understand why things were done in the old system. And it reminds me a lot of someone looking at someone else's coding and not knowing why it's there, and then basically having to redo it, either because the documentation wasn't there, or they honestly just think that the coding sucks and they can do a better job. Like if there's no good documentation with coding, if you've ever done coding, or they can do a better job just right out of the get-go, and then they're just redoing everything they did in Overwatch 1. Everything, like almost everything we're seeing here is just them. I haven't seen things that are just better than Overwatch 1. The only thing I think is better here is two things. One is that your MMR, your skill, is not directly related to just your wins and losses. I think there's a lot more that goes into games, whether or not you win or not. You can be really good and fucking perform your heart out and still lose. That doesn't make you a worse player, but you lost, right? It doesn't mean your personal skill and how well you did in the game, you as a person makes you horrible. It's weighted, so let's say 30% of your score comes from, it depends on how they weight the system, but 30% of your score for your MMR comes from whether or not you win or lose, right? And then the other 70% can come from different elements depending on how they're tracking stats or what things they actually expect, whether or not you're in a team fight, you're participating in a team fight, how big of a difference you made in a team fight, for instance. They can definitely, if they have a good stat tracking system, they can definitely keep track of all this shit. I definitely think that your MMR as a player should definitely be based off of more than just wins and losses. I think the 7 and 20 was a good idea because it obfuscates whether or not players will be able to suss out what things help their score. And people, if they figure out there's a weighted system and something is making their MMR much higher, they will play the fuck out of that shit. They will abuse the fuck out. It doesn't matter if they throw out the game, and that's not what you want. It doesn't matter if they throw out the game as long as it increases their score, because that's what people jerk off to, right? That is the reward, is your rank, your top 500 rank, for instance, right? Is your jerk off. It doesn't even matter if you throw the game as long as you get a good rank, right? So 7 and 20 is good. Basing it off more than wins and losses is good. Everything else that seems that we're seeing here is just bad. Having two ranks, one that's your outward-facing rank and one that's your inner-facing rank, and your outward-facing rank doesn't always represent your inner-facing rank. Really dumb. I don't know why that exists, but it does. It could just be another way of obfuscating the inner workings of the MMR system. But as we are seeing based on the Steam rules, it is not working extremely well. So, yeah, I don't know. Really, definitely seems like there is a new dev team for the MMR, and they are not necessarily super great at what they're doing. And part of it could be because Kaplan left, and my guess is part of the team also left along with Kaplan. Just it wasn't public because Kaplan was basically the face of Overwatch for a long time.
Long-term plans and goals. In the long term, we're planning to provide new ways for players to share a challenging and competitive experience in Overwatch 2. We'll share more on this down the road. That said, matchmaking improvements are an evergreen area of focus for the team, and we'll stay focused on testing and deploying continuous improvements to our matchmaking algorithm. Finally, we'll continue to watch for your feedback and improve upon the overall ranked experience over time. Our goal continues to be delivering matchmaking that feels fair and balanced for everyone.
There's just a lot of fluff in that, guys. Long-term goals and plans. This reminds me of, like, if you have someone that has a job and they're really good at shit talking, this reminds me just of a lot of bullshit. This whole thing right here just reminds me of if you have a car salesman trying to sell you a car and they fill it with a bunch of buzzwords and just random jargon that has nothing to do with actually fixing the system or things that they're tackling. This reminds me of fluff and bullshit right here. So it could actually be that people who are in this system might actually not be good at what they're doing too. If they have to make up a bullshit statement, yeah. And then they have this reminded me of closing thoughts right here. Now we have a second closing thoughts.
Closing thoughts. The goal of our matchmaker is to make each match as fair as possible.
Okay.
Meaning your team has an
Which
equal
would have been a
chance
goal.
of winning or losing each individual match. We firmly believe the most
But
fun
of course
games
it
of
is, right?
Overwatch are when they are fair, and our team is
Okay,
committed to
there it is
discovering and
again.
implementing new changes and updates that align our game with that goal.
But they don't
Overwatch
really talk about
2 is a
them.
continually evolving experience with new game modes, new heroes,
Not
and
really.
new maps to explore.
Aren't
This
really new
also
game
means
modes.
we need to provide a constantly updated experience that can deliver the fairest possible matches through effective changes to how our matchmaker works and through clear communication with all of you. We look forward to seeing all of you on the battlefield.
Yeah, honestly, it strikes me as a lot of bullshit here. Like if you're just listening to someone just bullshit with you. All right, maybe there'll be more information here. Let's take a look at this.
Q. Do you deliberately place players into winner queues and loser queues? There are no winner or loser queues in Overwatch. Your current MMR is the only thing the matchmaker takes into consideration when forming your matches. The matchmaker doesn't force a 50% win rate on anyone, nor do we favor certain players over others. At its core, our matchmaker is a mathematical formula used to place similarly ranked players together.
I mean, they do because they love pre-mades to stomp pubs, so yeah, they do actually favor someone, maybe not in their MMR purely in their rating, but choices they have made definitely favor certain groups of individuals.
In a match with the goal of creating as fair of games as possible.
Yeah, so I would agree with this, that they're probably trying to mathematically make the fairest games as possible. They aren't doing a good job, though. And that if there's puggers in there, if you have a pre-made and a 5-stack playing against puggers, they're probably going to stomp the shit out of them, which is favoring certain groups of individuals. Winners and losers queues. By the way, guys, I played a significant amount of Heroes of Storm. Heroes of Storm generally feels like a system that has SPMM too. It honestly feels like they designed the game to make you sit you at a 50% win rate. So this is kind of old logic. I don't think this has ever been the case in Overwatch in any way, shape, or form, in the new system or the old system. But in Heroes of Storm, the game definitely tries to keep you at a 50% win rate in quick play. Maybe not in ranked. I don't know how. I never really played ranked because there's no one that plays ranked in Heroes of Storm anymore. But in quick play, they'll pair you with some very unskilled individuals to offset it, and it's usually it seems like it's based on win rate, and it could just be that it keeps you around 50%, because that's just where equilibrium ends up, at 50% win-loss rate. But I don't think that's the case in Overwatch at all.
Q. Why do I sometimes have a large win or loss streak? Sometimes, if a player goes on a very long win-loss streak, it's indicative that their internal rating is not well calibrated.
Yeah.
The best way to calibrate your rank is to continue playing.
Or they're playing with a pre-made and then they weren't. Or they're still playing with a pre-made and then they weren't. Or they were going against pre-mades and then they weren't. Surprise! Pre-mades make a huge difference. Ah! Yeah, no way, right? No fucking way. But they aren't saying that, and they aren't going to mention that, but pre-mades 100% throw off every single fucking metric in the book.
Playing competitively.
And even in Overwatch 2, or Overwatch 1, I understood that if you're in GM, you generally have to duo queue, and people still duo queue all the time in Overwatch 2. Especially if they're in GM, because having two really good people on your team that you know that are experienced with each other and know what they're doing is a pretty big deal.
The more data we have, the closer you'll get to a rank that
It's one of
best
the things I never
represents
did in
your
Overwatch
skill.
1.
However, there are times when players are going to get lucky with their win streaks or the opposite with loss streaks.
Sure.
We're investigating this and we'll be testing some changes to see if we can reduce this kind of streaking in the future.
So they do admit that there is streaking and that it's unrelated to just random RNG, which RNG, guys, when it comes to stats, you'll have a distribution, right? And people will end up in this distribution. You'll have some people that will be really lucky or really unlucky, right? People win the lottery. Not everyone wins the fucking lottery, right? There's a lot of unlucky people for that one lucky person that wins the lottery. So while there is RNG, which can just be random, at the end of the day, there is a problem where there's streaking, and my guess is directly related to pre-mades, and the other one is cheats, is my guess. The cheating part in Overwatch 2, as I've talked about in my stream multiple times, cheating in Overwatch 2 is much, much worse than it was in Overwatch 1. Overwatch 1, you used to have to go to like backroom forums, or you'd have to go to like Chinese marketplace like Taobao to find cheats. In Overwatch 2, you can type 2 words into Google, Overwatch cheats, and find working cheats for the game, including public free options. I'm not teaching you how to cheat if you're too stupid to type Overwatch cheats into Google, or someone thinks this is select knowledge. It's not. Including public forums with working cheats on them. And they'll even teach you how to make cheats for the game. So, yeah. Have you ever played the lottery? Of course I have. When the jackpots get high enough, I usually go and buy a lottery ticket. You drastically increase your odds of winning by buying a single lottery ticket than if you didn't at all. I don't buy more than one. I don't do like 5,000 rolls or something like that. I just buy a lottery ticket, and that's just the way it is. So when like you get like the lottery gets up to like $1 billion, I'll buy a lottery ticket because it's $2, and if I win $1 billion, that's great. Or $3. If I win $1 billion, that'd be fucking fantastic. But I don't expect to win, and it probably will never win. But you know, the difference between buying a lottery ticket and not buying a lottery ticket is the difference between you having an iota of a chance and you having no chance. It's a really good way of looking at things. And don't go buy 5 million tickets or something. Just one ticket is all it takes to actually get a chance at winning. Otherwise, you have no chance of winning. So, but yeah. Anyways, going back to streaking, guys. Yeah. So there is a problem. They understand there's a problem. This is them admitting to that, by the way. They understand there's a problem with streaking in their game, and it's unrelated to just RNG luck. So, yeah, my guess is it's either pre-mades or cheating.
Q. Does my competitive rank affect matchmaking? We only create matches based on players' MMR, not the visible competitive rank.
So, your competitive rank, your competitive rank, once again, there's two types of rank. There is the outward-facing system, which you think is your actual rank, and then there's the inner-facing MMR. Why these two are different, I still don't understand. We've talked about them multiple times, but they're different. And as I've mentioned back in Overwatch 1, and still think is true, is when you are in quick play, you are still in ranked. You are playing ranked in quick play. It's just weighted differently because why would they throw out the data? It's not like you're a different person. Maybe you get like a performance anxiety or something, but your rank in your ability to perform in quick play should be relatively on par with your ability to perform in ranked to a certain extent and competitive to a certain extent, right? And you can weight that and go, give so much of a balance to what people are doing. But with enough games, you're going to throw out the games, for instance, where someone just fucks around, right? The ones that are the outliers, you can actually form a pretty good baseline from just someone playing quick play, even if they don't play competitive. There's no reason to throw out the data from quick play in and of itself, unless it's a lot different than competitive is, which is one of the problems I have with the game is that quick play is not all that different from competitive, and it honestly hurts their casual player base, in my opinion. Putting that aside, yeah, so they're basically admitting to that, but
a player's visible rank will move towards their rating over time as they continue to play during a season. When we decay ranks at the beginning of a season, this has no effect on players' underlying ratings.
And they said they're removing decay. Or were they just removing decay rank? They don't do a very good job of separating. They don't do a very good job of separating internal MMR from their external visible system. So starting with Season 4, we are planning to remove seasonal competitive rank resets, which might mean they're only changing the visible rank reset, not the internal MMR system. So it could be that with their wording, like I said before, has a lot to be desired here. It could be that they're only removing the rank reset from your visible rank and your visible seasonal rank decay. Not your rating behind the scenes. And I actually think that they confuse themselves sometimes in this wording. I have to go back through and re-talk about this because I took a certain stance on it earlier, which is that this was the internal system that you're actually rated on. And it might not be. This is only the visible badge that everyone sees. This is not the internal system, which is how the matches are formed. But they talked about it as if it was the internal system on how matches were formed. So maybe not. Like, they need two different words here, and they don't use two different words to describe two different systems where they intermingle each other. They interwork and intermingle with each other a lot. Jesus Christ. Yeah, so they're just basically saying that their outward-facing rank does not influence their inward-facing rank, and it never will. Does my competitive rank affect matchmaking? And they didn't say they did not specify whether they're talking about competitive or quick play. What is going on here? Which would be different, right? Which is the whole thing I just talked about with it.
Q. Why
But they
does
might
the
not be.
quality of my matches go down at the start of a season? When Season 2 went live,
Yeah.
a lot of players who stopped playing during Season 1 came back, so the population of players playing ranked changed dramatically overnight.
Yep.
Ratings are
Worst
a
time to
measure of
play.
your skill relative to the rest of the players you interact with. Events that cause the population to change a lot will result in some turbulence.
Yep.
We're exploring some ideas for how to tackle this in the future.
Like remove decay. Okay.
But I've mentioned this before. It's not just in Overwatch 2, but in Overwatch 1. The worst time to play is when everyone comes back. Like, the first couple days is the worst time to play. When everyone's getting situated.
Q. Can we do a full rating reset? A full rating reset wouldn't create a great experience since it would mean throwing out all the knowledge we have about players. This would
And basically allow you to play against people that might be vastly over or under your rank, which could lead... It's like saying, can we just have not having skill-based matchmaking games, right?
cause new players to be matched against our pros, which is fun for about 30 seconds. We've experienced this ourselves in internal playtests.
Yeah.
To be clear, ratings aren't a 100% accurate representation of every player's skill. Some players aren't in the right spot, but the system is a vast store of knowledge about the relationship in skill between millions of players, most of whom have never even directly played against one another.
Once again, we're assuming they're talking about internal MMR, not the externally facing system. The rating, your MMR rating, not the external badge. On a hard stuff, get a low rating. You're playing Mercy on support is one of the possibilities.
Q. Why am I hard stuck at a low rating that doesn't
Assuming they're
reflect
actually
my
skilled.
skill? Ultimately, the only way you can increase your rating is to win more matches than you lose. Since we're
Not true. There are people that, once again, the whole reason they have the 5 and 20 guys is because it's not based purely on wins and losses, which is very true, because there's people that have ranked up off losses and there's people that have ranked down on wins. So this they're like already lying. Already off the bat they're lying. So what?
putting any given player on a random team with 9 random other players, with enough matches, that player's contributions are the only constant factor throughout, so their rating should end up reflecting their skill. There are some
There's inconsistencies in their QA within their own dev blog about stuff they're talking about. It's like either multiple people wrote this, or whoever's writing this is just bullshitting people most of the time. Ultimately, the only way you can increase your rating is to win more matches than you lose. But we know that's not true. So, what? And then at the top, if you're at the top, that means if you, let's say, lose 50.1% of your matches, that means you're going to go down, right? Until you stop and you go back up. That'd be the old system. which is almost completely based on your wins and losses, if not completely.
Interesting phenomena here, though, that make this more complicated. For example, we have data showing that matches become less predictable the lower the average rating of a match.
Yep.
Predictability is a measure of how likely.
Yeah, consistency, because consistency starts mattering whether or not people can make headshots, how they're feeling, whether or not they AFK in the middle of a match. I could 100% believe. We remember when we talk about Dead by Daylight, and I talk about the weighting system in their skill-based matchmaking and how certain things matter. I said in Dead by Daylight and in older systems too. In Dead by Daylight, this lower 50% of the player base, you can just whack off and never make any balancing changes or ever look at them as part of your player base in any way, shape, or form. These guys down here have no idea what the fuck they're doing, and might not even be playing the game in a normal way because they're so bad or they just don't care, right? And potentially they could get good. But this lower 50% of the player base, we can just assume has generally no idea what they're doing, and as such, you should just throw out the data. You put them all in their wood tier. You could just call it wood tier. Why even call it bronze? You can put them in wood tier, which includes silvers and golds. Just put them in their wood tier here and just never look at them, because what they do down there doesn't make sense to most people because they're just playing a game that might not even be the game that you're talking about, right? They're so bad or don't care or whatever that you can't pull meaningful data from that, and it'll actually corrupt your metrics. You'll pull data that'll make your other metrics look bad because you won't be able to figure anything out based on it because it's pseudo random. Like they're losing their fucking mind. They have no idea what they're doing down there. And as such, it wouldn't necessarily, it's not even good data, in my opinion. It's not good, it's not metrics that you want because they generally don't even know what they're doing. So why would you? So the whole reason for bringing that up for skill-based matchmaking in Dead by Daylight is because if they made balancing changes based on where you are in MMR, which I do think that MMR should influence how the game is balanced, and it should just be very visible so everyone knows what's happening, and it tells you very visibly what's happening in Dead by Daylight, not in Overwatch. In Dead by Daylight, low MMR games are very dominated by killers because survivors have no idea what they're doing. It's an asymmetrical game, which means killers are very powerful. It doesn't matter what killer they're playing. It doesn't matter what perks they're using. They're very powerful compared to high MMR, where survivors literally can just dick all over the fucking killer if they're in a pre-made that's very organized. They can just shit all over the killer, and I have a bunch of videos about that, and a different game, but there is a huge shift in power between people that have no idea what they're doing and people that know what they're doing in an asymmetrical game in that case, and you can't just make a flat buff across the board because different MMRs are going to be influenced differently by different things you do. Because, a Torb turret, just like going back to the Overwatch 1 with with console players, Torb turrets in Symmetra, they had to specifically nerf the turrets in Overwatch 1 because controller players can barely move. They can barely do shit, which is one of the reasons, by the way, controllers are horrible. They should not give them aim assist, and they should allow console players to use a keyboard and mouse because they're fucking terrible. But like I said, it corrupts the data because people that are that low in MMR, they can barely function in the game itself, but you need to work around them because they just aren't having a good time, right? But those guys can barely move their aim, and then they just die to an automated turret because it's an aimbot, right? And instead of nerfing the turrets, by the way, they could just made it so depending on the MMR, it'll be more accurate. Surprise! Once again, just making a system that is a little bit more flexible to the players that are playing in it, and for some reason it escapes majority developers, and I don't know why. Just make it very visible so players can see what's going on, and so they can be able to deal with it when the need arises. And Dead by Daylight, it's a little bit more cut and dry than this is. But lower 50%, I wasn't talking about them jerking off their the lower 50% of the player base. It's rather you just don't make balancing decisions based around the lower 50% of the player base. And by the way, I'm not saying that everyone needs to be highly skilled. The top 50% of players includes a lot of players that aren't. They're just average Joes. So that'll include your best players, but it'll also include a lot of normal people. And you could break it up to 50, 80, 80 to 95, and then the top 5% in terms of what's going on there. It'd be a better distribution of players, but they don't really do that. But yeah, where they're talking about basically the lower 50%, I honestly don't even think they should look at stats from the lower 50%. They have no idea what they're doing. And it's just the way it is. And they could give it, who cares if they're having fun, they're fucking around, whatever. Doesn't matter, right?
likely the favored team is to win because two teams never have identical ratings. One team is always going to be slightly favorite for a variety of reasons: team coordination, gameplay mistakes, and new players who are trying out different roles and 30-plus heroes. The result is that we get a little bit less signal to use to calibrate ratings. We're working on some ways to use the signal we get more clearly, so stay tuned.
Signal? You mean stats? Oh, God, the jargon. No, please, no signal. No signal. Just stats. The stats you're getting.
Q. So you don't take the number of eliminations, damage dealt, healing provided, or any other scoreboard stats to adjust my MMR after each match.
This would infer that what they do in the match,
Not completely. There's wiggle room here, but the MMR is based on more than wins and losses in Overwatch 2.
Overwatch 2, your MMR adjustment after every match is not impacted by your performance in each match, regardless of your skill tier. This is for a few reasons.
So, there's a lot of different wording they're using here. You got skill tier, you have your MMR, and then you have your rank, your outward-facing rank, right? So now there's three different terms for basically the same thing, right? What is skill tier? What is the definition? I would like for them to make a glossary for every single time they try to attribute a performance metric to a player in their game as a wording for it. Because now we have skill tier, we have MMR, and then we also have like your outward facing rank. And they call that different things throughout this QA and through multiple of their QAs, which is one of the reasons I think these guys are kind of don't know what the fuck they're doing. Because I don't think internally they have these terms nailed down for each other so that they can actually use firm wording and verbiage to attribute different elements to different things in their game. And once again, it's not that I don't think they have. I think in Overwatch 1 they used to, and Overwatch 2 they don't. Different development team.
We don't want players to be focused on doing things other than trying to focus on the objectives and win the match.
Yeah, so
Dealing the
So once again, one of the reasons there's a 5 and 15 and 7 and 20 is they try to hide their weighted system. And they aren't completely saying there's a weighted system, but there's definitely a weighted system. We know this because you can figure it out through logical construct of how they're forming it, right? Because the 5 and 20, 5 and 15 wouldn't even need to be there if you could literally get it. Besides maybe making you feel better and less anxiety or whatever. And they could just have an option where you turn it off and you turn it on. But based on what we've seen, and also from people that have played Quick Play, especially top tier players not Quick Play comp, who have top tier players who have played it, that sometimes when they win all their matches, they downrank, and sometimes when they lose 20 matches, God forsake, they lose 20 matches and then they go up in rank. There are all sorts of anecdotals to this, so we know that it's not just wins and losses, despite them saying it's wins and losses, but up there, which is what I pointed out, because it's not wins and losses. And they could just say again that it's wins and losses right here. Once again, it feels like there's multiple people just answering questions here, and they don't all seem to know what they're doing. They aren't all on the same page.
Most damage or getting kills won't help your team if your actions don't help them push the payload or capture a control point. Also, for some heroes, especially those in the support role, it can be challenging to determine if the numbers they produce reflect their skill.
Yep. Like a Lucio, for instance, that's wall riding somewhere and not actually paying attention to the match at all. Yeah, it can. Yeah, it can. And how much of their character is playing the player and how much of the player is playing the character. It's a great way of looking at it. Is the game playing the player or is the player playing the game? Yeah, and some characters are much easier to do than other characters in that regard. So, this is once again why you obfuscate the weighted system right here, is because otherwise people can abuse it, and they will, to make their superficial rating that everyone online cares about bigger.
Q. Why do streamers and pro players often have such long queue times and often end up in poor quality matches? Perhaps the largest factor that influences match quality is just the population of players at that skill level.
Yeah.
Top 500 is a small population compared to the millions of players at lower ranks.
Yeah.
Towards the center of the rating curve, There are tons of players in the matchmaking queue for
Normal
us to choose
distribution,
from,
a
all of whom
Gaussian
would allow for a
distribution.
good match, so it's much easier for us to ensure a good quality match. Contrast this with OWL pros, who make up something like 0.001%
Depends on how wide the
of
rating
the
is, the
Overwatch
ranking
player
is.
population.
How fast do you want the
For
queues to
players
move?
at the very top, it's very hard to guarantee a good experience because there are just so few players. Fundamentally, it often comes down to a hard trade-off between making worse matches or
Yeah.
dramatically increasing queue times.
What you just
and
said,
they're
yeah.
unfortunately already very long for these players. We have some changes coming that should improve match quality for high MMR players, and we're talking about even more sophisticated things we could do in the future.
I'd be curious what sophisticated things they could do in the future, which they aren't going to tell us about. But I would actually be curious about that, like how you could dial things down even more for these players to make it more that wouldn't apply to everyone else too. That would be kind of weird. Besides putting you handicap them, basically is what it comes down to, is you get people that are really bad to put on their team so that it offsets it, which based on watching some really good Overwatch players, I actually think they do sometimes, is they put a really bad player on their team to offset their how good the player is. So, which is generally horrible, by the way. You can only make up for so much if you got like dead weight on your team, not rhetorical dead weight, but like actual players that aren't around your skill, and then you have to try and carry them. They do that a lot in Overwatch or in Heroes of the Storm, particularly because there's less players playing, and as such, depending if you're how skilled you are, they're going to put you with dead weight in order to drag down your team, and it does work. It 100% works. So hopefully it's not that, but it's definitely something they can do. Okay, so let's go back through here, guys. Overall, just recapping this, it seems an awful lot like there's new developers, just like I mentioned in my last video, there's new developers that don't necessarily know exactly what they're doing. They are not all on the same page. They don't use the same glossary of terms. They don't talk about things in the same way, which is unfortunate. But it definitely shows that they are not all interacting with each other in the way that they should, which is probably why we're seeing differences in the MMR system where it's not necessarily all consistent. Throughout this QA, it looks like multiple people were responding to this in different ways, including one person saying that it's based ultimately, which there's wiggle room there, ultimately, which implies the majority of your ultimately, I'd say, is like 99.9% of your match is based on wins and losses. Ultimately, that's different than there is definitely a weighted system in the background. I'm just gonna call bullshit on that. Right here. Why am I hard stock at low rating that doesn't reflect my skill? Ultimately, the only way you can increase your rating is to win more matches than you lose. That's just bullshit. That's just straight up bullshit right there. It definitely, as I mentioned, there is a lot of anecdotal evidence to this, and logically it makes a lot of sense based on them obfuscating the ranks, the rank increases and decreases, obfuscating the ranking system with the 5 and 15 and 720. Yeah, I'm just going to call bullshit on this. And they use multiple terms for the same thing, and they don't describe it. Whoever describes this is not very good at necessarily explaining themselves all the time. Some of these guys in this QA are not very good at explaining themselves all the time. And it seems like they aren't all on the same page where they use different terminology for MMR, your outwardly facing rank that you can visibly see, your skill, your talent, your skill tier, your talent, here's skill tier. Then you have reflect my skill, which I assume is the same thing as skill tier, which is different. Your inherent values of your, like you could actually use a glossary here. I guess your skill is your internal actual skill, and your MMR is the system they use that is not visible. And then you have rank, which is the outward visible system. So there's like 3 different versions for the same thing, but they don't word it in such a way, and then they use it in ways that conflict each other throughout the QA, which I talked about a couple different times throughout here. Going back to like an overall recap here, it doesn't seem like they're all on the same page with their wordage and verbiage and what they're talking about here. Their glossary of terms seems to be different between each developer that's responding to this, and I think there's multiple people here. Or the person that's responding to this doesn't even remember what they said in their earlier responses, which is even scarier. So either there's multiple people responding to this, they are not all on the same page, or you have someone that's kind of schizophrenic and doesn't really remember what they talk about, which is also very scary. So, yeah. In general, So we're going to go back to this here. Starting with Season 4, we're planning to remove seasonal competitive rank resets and all current and past seasonal rank decay. If the decay to your internal MMR, not your outward-facing rank, if the decay to your internal MMR does no longer exist, that's bad, because decay is good. Because this helps players coming back get back into the system. You need that. If it's just the outward-facing rank, what? I mean, once again, I don't understand why they have an internal MMR and then an outward rank when they aren't one and the same, but once again, it seems like either that outward-facing rank there is to confuse people and prevent them from trying to fuck with each other, or prevent them from trying to figure out the system, or there's two systems in place and one doesn't really reflect the old system or the new system, so I don't know, guys. Very, very weird. And throughout this, guys, we have closing thoughts and long-term goals, and long-term goals was just more closing thoughts. Good. I love when people just add fluff here. Why is this even here when this is here? I don't know. And this, you probably could just remove this. I don't even know why they talked about this. They didn't really say anything. They just said, we'll talk about more down the road. Okay. Okay. Alrighty. Okay. We're gonna make a highlight of this, guys. We covered part 1 already and analyzed that, so